Hi, it's Michael. Welcome to week two. Whoops, there we go. Welcome to week two. Thank you for your work this week. I want to commend you all for rolling with the huge class size that we have. It really is the largest class ever, and I tend to be very hands-on. And we can also be, as you can probably see, we're deliberately testing out some ideas in terms of information architecture that may be confusing and disconcerting at first, but I promise you they will lead you to understand a little bit more by doing it rather than trying to understand too many theories behind it. And the first theory we have is about how do we organize data. And you're seeing here a bunch of data. And is it organized? Not really. It's a bunch of different kinds of things in a row. We'll get to this actually in a couple of weeks about just putting things in a row helps. But as we got into some of these particular goals, as you're sharing different stories, I wanted to point out I put this in a particular format, and I kind of put a little note here about how to mimic this format, and many of you did, and many of you did not. And there's nothing particularly wrong with that, but as you may come in as a user, and you're going to come in, try to read, try to understand, maybe go through this a little bit, you're going to start to realize how changing out formats and doing things in different ways, while completely acceptable, again, this has nothing to do with me. I'm actually happy about this because it shows rather than tells why some sort of concepts, as someone mentioned about cards and things like that, are so ubiquitous, because they're just useful ways of handling really dense amount of information. And as we get dense, I want to try to get you all to understand ways to manage that density, which will again become very useful in around week 7 or 8. But right now, we don't have to necessarily, we can learn it as we go along. So one example here is that this can be an infinite canvas. We don't have to have this artificial size. Yet it is kind of fun that I made these weird little boxes, and there's a feeling of like coloring in and outside of the lines. What I find interesting is that the people come in early in the week, and good for you, because there's something that you do which is interesting, which is sometimes set a tone of how something will look and how it will be answered, and then people start to copy that. And every single time I've taught someone, it's different, but people tend to repeat things, even though there is no often any restrictions on how you're going to share something. So I just think it's fun to watch, and especially as we start to run out of room, my hope was that people would become less verbose. Yet that isn't necessarily happening, which is fine too. You have things to say, you're talking about McManus, etc. And remember, because there are 20 people, there are no group assignments in this class. I'm going to do everything as an individual, but yet you're all going to be on the same journey. And as Weinberger sort of spoke very nicely about, is the network effect. The network becomes more important than the authority or the right answer. It's more about how deeply entrenched are the ideas and how connected are they to each other. And so hopefully, one thing I did notice, and this may be true of Weinberg, is once someone has made a point, you don't need to make the point again. I understand that everyone wants to be noticed about their own insight, but sometimes, there's only so much you can do. So if you can't add something new, perhaps you could add, nuance to a question or a tangent, or ask another question of the point that someone had already made that you wanted to make. So that's why we can sort of build on a network effect, even though here everyone may or may not have had their own takes on things. Perhaps it's the age of the clip, but I was surprised that people don't notice that McManus is kind of messing with us. The transparent computer is a joke and not a real thing, but he sort of plays off this idea that there's this infinite computing and all this other stuff, which brings his point home, which is what do you do to make sense of all this stuff, right? Even if you have these amazing computers, and you'll see just here, like let's say you were AI and you were trying to make sense of this, it's hard to make sense of it. That's all. Context is very challenging, and it'll never not be challenging. So trust me, this is still just learning the basics of how do you manage to make something interesting and usable, and it's not always just making it look all the same. So a lot to learn in the class. As we got into wayfinding, I think my question wasn't very good because I was really more hoping about an anecdote about being lost, yet it seems as though maybe it's in the age of either terrific signage or computers that we just don't get lost as much anymore. That's cool. I mean, I'm happy. Although I certainly have been lost so many times and had signage fail me, which is kind of where I was going, and I really didn't get a lot of that. Everybody seems very happy with how one deals with signage in most cases. So cool. I just maybe next time I'll change this around a little bit. A lot of good thoughts here, but once you saw this pattern, you don't have to repeat the same thing over and over again. I get it, and everyone else does too. So remember, work on this network effect. Let's build on each other's explorations. If people come in early with a good point, try to build upon that point. Same thing is true, I think, of any of these discussions in Canvas, but here, maybe because it's more visual, we do have to be a little more careful because the organization's up to us. Hint, hint, that's on purpose. Okay, so we'll see what happens this week. It's going to be a different world. Let's check it out. So we're going to go off to week 2, starting our journey into our first assignment, which is to find some content. Now, uh, this is about the data model of X, used to be Twitter. The reason it's here is that Twitter is probably one of the biggest databases in the world that's freely accessible to anybody. And it has it's not a complex data model, but it's nice to look into all the things that they have and capture that may not just be part of what is called the tweet, right? The tweet is what everybody's there for, but there's a lot of data that support the tweet. Much like here's a song in iTunes, you can see all the data that may or may not be available, but all the data that helps support that MP3 file or whatever the file is that it actually has the music in it. So the goal this week is to understand that there's more data than just the kind of important headline of what the data is about. It's supporting data. And the goal I'd like you to do is start with X or Twitter. I think you do have to create an account to go search Twitter, and you're going to find the advanced search area to see some of these fields. And one hope is that you aren't necessarily going to um, use hashtags, which were not invented by Twitter, but someone else invented the idea and then they added it because it was so hard to find anything. And that's a whole different topic. We'll get to hashtags in a couple weeks too, or the concept of hashtags. So yeah, your goal here is to search for something outside of what is the content of the tweet, maybe something about who wrote it, a location, a place, and you're going to just use this as a search engine to see like what do these particular fields do. How do they help you find something? That's what this exercise is about. And how you'll do that is that you might use the search and you'll get a thread, and then all you need to do is to take this copy it, the URL that was generated, and paste it into paste it right here. So I'll just show you. If you hit paste, it'll create a this kind of funny cool container thing, and then you can edit this and say what was nice about it or what you liked or didn't like. Same container as I was talking about before. Um, and I'll leave this here just as an example. It might have an image, it might not. That's fine. It's really just here and explaining kind of, did you get this little exercise or not, right? Do you understand? Like Twitter really should return results on almost anything, and it's raw, right? It doesn't have any. It's not very clever at all, and you'll use those fields to make it a little more clever. And then we'll get into our assignment. So yeah, we're going to talk about perfume, and believe me, a lot of this is already discussed on videos and such in this week. So I'll just give you this super quickly. Mine is about found a perfume. I was really interested in making perfumes, but the site had all these chemicals and they just weren't organized well. So I got those chemicals or got that data out, and I'm trying to organize that data. And that's just where you're going to start with any topic you are interested in. And there's different ways to do it. Uh, this one, I think import IO is actually gone and dead. I'll get rid of that. I think it's Web Scraper is a better one. It's Simple Scraper works too. These are all just plugins to Chrome, and when you turn them on, you'll see how this works. It's pretty simple, and you'll be surprised. It'll open up your eyes of the web is really just databases, and you'll be able to see them, and you can take things. And then you get started on project one by creating something in Airtable. Here is my data in Airtable. Airtable is a database, even though it may look like a spreadsheet, it is not. Uh, Databases have different qualities of the field. Sometimes a field is a number, sometimes a field is a piece of text, sometimes it's a controlled piece of text, like a state in state city thing. You know, states, there's only a certain number of them, right? So they can have all these capabilities and restrictions that make it useful, which spreadsheets don't have. They're numbers. So yeah, this is just about how can you get data for project one. You can go into Airtable. They've got a whole area to explore of bases, just things to start with for different topics and ideas. You're going to look for something very qualitative rather than something transactional. Like, hey, if you're going to do a store, um, make the store about selling a particular kind of thing because we want to model like well, like records are good or well, I'm not even going to start because that's the fun of this week is to stretch yourself a little bit to try to figure out what data you can find. There's also JSON, which is a way to just connect to databases that give out all sorts of different kinds of data. It's a structured way of querying something. I would say there's probably also some AI things out there that might give you data and fill in some blanks for you. I'm going to let you explore, see what you can come up with. And at the end, the same thing is true. I'm just interested what's your topic, right? What are you looking at? And just to reiterate, qualitative things. So if you're looking at huge amounts of numbers about something, there's a database for the city of Chicago that has a lot of numeric data. We're not going to do numeric work in this class. We will touch upon it later. That's data visualization, which is just a different way of doing information architecture. We're going to do it based on describing a topic. So put your link in here, and I've got a big area for questions if people are struggling with anything. And hopefully you've gotten feedback from me on your ideas and answers. I'm going to be pretty attentive, and hopefully we'll get a good solid start this week so that next week we can finish up and have some data to work with, which will be able to take us to the next step. Let me know if there's any questions, and hopefully the movies are here to help get everybody together on the same page, as sometimes that's a little bit difficult without an in-class meeting. So, hope that helps. See ya.